Ever wanted to enter the nightmarish reality of Nightmare on Elm Street in video game format? Well, luckily or unluckily for you, there are two games out there that form a video game franchise, and I've played both of them. Is it worth it to check them out? Stick around, and I'll tell you. My name is Fortefyre, and welcome to Series Slayer. Horror movies are things that I openly avoided during my childhood because I was a part of the ADHD generation of kids, a child that was medicated for an over-imaginative mind, and I feel in many ways what I visually consumed, to be honest, it scared me. For a while, I avoided horror games. I recall playing D and Dino Crisis, and both of those games made me scared to close the shower curtain. And guess what? As far as I know, there's not even a shower curtain scene in the game. That's just how my brain processed things. As I grew older, I was more open to checking out horror movies. In particular, my favorite franchise was Friday the 13th. My dad even took me to the reboot when I was a kid. It was the first time ever seeing boobies in the theater. What a bonding moment. Now, if we fast forward to 2022, I wanted to sit down and catch up with all of these movies that I missed growing up. Heavy-hitting franchises like Halloween, Alien, or in the case of today's episode, Nightmare on Elm Street. As with most licensed mediums, Nightmare on Elm Street was not safe from the potential to be nabbed up by companies and abused for a quick profit. We all know the story. Freddy Krueger kills you in your dreams. If you played our cards right, you could make a solid game based on that, but the question is, did they? Now, I will say this episode will have a few spoilers, mainly involving gameplay, and if you want to avoid seeing them, I would suggest not watching this video until you've taken the time to check it out for yourself. But if you're still here, let's begin. The Nightmare on Elm Street game franchise begins in 1989, specifically with a DOS game that managed to get a secondary release on the Commodore 64. Now, between me and you, Commodore 64, for as novel and important as it is to gaming history, is a motherfucker to emulate, so I only had one option: DOS. The game itself is based on The Dream Warriors, which is the third movie in the franchise. It was released in 1987, and we begin our journey by choosing one of the Dream Warriors: Kincaid, Kristen, Will, Nancy, or Taryn. We can't choose Joey because he's a victim, and essentially he's the objective of the game. But don't sit on this screen for too long because Freddy's a douchebag and he'll kidnap another random person. Fuck! So choose your character and prepare to rescue the rest. You'll notice there are two meters, that's the soul meter and the power meter. Soul equals health, and power equals our unique abilities. If you've seen the movie, each of these characters have a dream power. Kincaid can do a power punch based on his super strength. Kristen has a power kick, likely a reference to her gymnastics. And of course, Taryn has her knives, which if I'm honest, Taryn's reference is probably the only one that makes sense. Now that we understand the basics, let's get into the game. Once the game starts, we have our first level. It's more of a gimmick. We basically run around town from the top-down perspective, trying to find Freddy's house, all the while being chased by a comically, and I do mean comically, large Freddy. He's the size of the Stay Puft Marshmallow, just a gargantuan douchebag. The problem I had with this is that it isn't fun. We're running around town hoping to find the house, and when we do, we do. Then the true game starts with a massive labyrinth of floors, each with their own gimmick. I want to say floor 3 has tons of teleport pads, another floor has a poisonous goo on the ground. It's dumb. Ideally, we're supposed to pick up items to rescue our friends and defeat Freddy, but good luck. This game is tedious as shit, and I was not a fan of it. I fucked it off after 4 hours of trying to make it past one stage. Now, the next game is the one that I did beat, and it's one that comes from the era of games that many people tend to gloss over because of the company associated with it, LJN. But should you decide to play this, I challenge you to instead focus on the developer, Rare. Every company has to start somewhere. We can't expect all developers to come out the gate shitting golden eggs. After all, 80% of companies start off making games that aren't great, and more often than not, the remaining 20% stems from developers who previously worked at other companies who were part of that 80% for a little bit. At some point, I'd like to create a video talking about the family tree of video game companies because where people moved in the industry and how that shaped our experiences as children is interesting to me, and I know people have mentioned it down below. It's coming, I just got to get through a lot of projects. But back to the game, Nightmare on Elm Street is one that gets a bad rep. If you only played it once and really didn't try to understand what was going on, you likely wouldn't have a good time. It's kind of the same experience you would have with Friday the 13th. You would die quickly because the game is being an asshole and you'd move on to something else. In this case, I didn't, because I saw the slight shimmer of hope in how the game plays out. Now, in comparison to the previous game, this one is based on the first movie. We play as generic white guy number 1, and our job is to go through locations on Elm Street to find the bones of Freddy Krueger, and we burn them in the furnace at the high school, which is the last level. For all intents and purposes, it's a beat 'em up, but most people see it as a platformer because in most cases, the biggest threat to me are gaps in the floor. There are tons of weird enemies that, in my opinion, don't make sense, like bats and snakes and zombies and skull creatures and spiders, right? I feel that they could have done better, but it is what it is. When you enter a stage, our whole objective is to find those bones, right? They're easy to find because they all look like comically shaped dog bones. That's his skeletal structure, right? All the while this is happening, we need to avoid being asleep. But if we do fall asleep, we can find these special dream power forms like the ninja, athlete, mage. I don't recall all of them, it's been quite a while since I've played this, but they do make the boss fights against Freddy much more sufferable, more interesting. Once it's done, it's done. And to be honest, had they paid a little bit more attention to how damage detection is done, I think that the game would have fared a little bit better. But it doesn't deserve the hate that it gets. Plus, you could play with 4 players. There aren't that many NES games that allowed you to do that, at least not in the ratio to the entire library. I will say that one of my peers on YouTube did an exemplary job of creating a well-informed walkthrough for the NES version. His name is Retronate, and honestly, I don't tend to reference others unless I genuinely believe that their content is informative and serves a significant purpose in preserving video game history. And I believe that Nate does that every time he releases one of these game walkthroughs. In many ways, he challenges the public perception of games, and that's not something that's easy. I appreciate it. I'm going to link it down below for you. So that begs the question, is the franchise worth it? I don't believe that it is. To me, this franchise had the potential for so much more through the years, but the closest thing we've ever come to playing as Freddy, or one of the Dream Warriors in a modern world, was Dead by Daylight, where he's one of the killers. The NES game is the one I would suggest you checking out. The DOS game is a suppository of sadness, and it isn't for me. That's it for today, though. Have you ever messed with any of the Nightmare on Elm Street games? If so, feel free to tell me how stupid I am. I do respond to every single comment, even the mean ones. And if you made it to the end of the spin-off episode where I ramble incoherently about games that chafe me in my naughty bits, then you're home in our community. We're a group of gaming enthusiasts that simply enjoy remembering when life was a little bit easier to live. And we're on our way to 8,000 subscribers, and I would love to hit that before my partner anniversary on YouTube. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.